why don't you stand up and fight this guy hard like you done before? That was beautiful. This guy just don't want to win, you know. He wants to bury you. He wants to humiliate you. He wants to prove to the whole world that it was nothing but some kind of a freak the first time out. Well, now, I don't want to get mad in a biblical place like this. But I think you're a hell of a lot more than that, kid. A hell of a lot.
Alright folks, how you doing? So in this video I'm going to be reading from the book William Wallace Robin Hood Revealed, and this is the Battle of Stirling Bridge, how it actually went down in real life. Quite the contrary to the rubbish that you see in Braveheart. So this is on page 111. The English army at this time wrought many evil deeds against Scotland. Their number was awful to see, consisting of 60,000 fighting men. They arrived at Stirling and laid siege to the castle, which was held at this time by Earl Malcolm. They thought to obey the command of Longshanks to remain there, but Wallace had other plans. Wallace left Dundee. He appointed a good chieftain to continue the assault on the castle, with 2,000 men of Angus and dwellers of Dundee. That same night he went to St. Johnstone, that was the capital at the time. In the morning he rode to Sheriff Muir, where he and his army bade a while in good array. He spoke with Graham and Ramsay. "This is my purpose. It would be too much to offer them battle upon a plain field unless we have some advantage," Sir John de Graham remarked. "We have undertaken with less power such a thing. That is well known," Wallace answered. "Only when we have been forced to, we should thank God for his protection, but my purpose is to be near the bridge and to employ some subtle plan against them," Ramsay spoke. "We can make a good defence of the bridge. The English have little knowledge of an alternative crossing." Wallace sent Jopp to set the battle for the next Tuesday. On the Saturday they rode on to the bridge. It was constructed of good plain board and was well built. Wallace deployed sentries so that no one else but he and his men could come upon the bridge. He found a carpenter, the best man of his craft, and took him to the bridge to saw the boards in half at the midpoint so that none could pass over. This man nailed riveted hinges to the boards, then filled up the saw marks with clay to hide his handiwork. At the other end he built supports consisting of 3 lengths of wood. When one was knocked away, all the rest would collapse. Wallace ordered the right to hide underneath the bridge upon a cradle that they had designed. Wallace told the carpenter he would give him a signal when he wished him to loose the pin. The man was to listen for a note which Wallace would blow upon his horn. He commanded all the men that no other horn was to be blown but his own. So what you actually get in reality is a very skillful piece of subtle engineering, which the English had not anticipated. It's not just 2 sets of guys across the other side of the field from each other just running at each other and whacking each other with swords. In real life it was a very clever plan. The day of the great battle approached. The English were not short on power. They outnumbered Wallace's army by 6 to 1. 50,000 of them took up their battle positions, while the rest remained beside the castle. They hoped to win both battlefield and castle. The Scots on the other side took to the field on foot and waited. Cressingham led the vanguard with 20,000 men. 30,000 were under the command of the Earl of Warren, but he wisely bade his time. Cressingham's host began to cross the bridge. Some Scotsmen who knew Wallace's plan suggested to him that was time to blow his horn, saying enough had already passed over the bridge. He ignored their pleas and sat waiting and watching until Warren's force was on the bridge. Wallace took the horn from Jopp, blew it to his lips, and gave a loud blast. John Wright, the carpenter, knocked out the pin, whereupon the bridge collapsed, and a hideous cry went up as both men and horses fell into the water. The Scots waited no longer, but fell upon their foes, confident they could defeat their opponents. They pressed upon the main body of the English soldiers. Wallace, Graham, Ramsay, and Lundy all fought fiercely in that stour, face to face with the enemy. The English host fell back from their position, which spread over 5 broad acres. Wallace on foot carried a great sharp spear. He ran into the thickest of the press and struck Cressingham, piercing the man's polished armour with the head of the spear. The English commander was slain. The English force lost confidence when they saw their leader killed. Again, this is Wallace's cleverness as a general. He just goes straight for the leader and just, decapitate the snake and the rest of the body dies. That's the old cliche, but it's very true. Many of them began to flee, while the more worthy of their warriors remained on the battlefield, until 10,000 of them lay dead. Then the rest began to flee in all directions, some east, some west, and some fleeing north. As many as 7,000 floated lifeless upon the fourth. Of Wallace's army, no man of renown was slain, except Andrew Moray. So interesting that Moray did not live until December, unless he actually died on the battlefield, which makes the most amount of sense, to be honest. The whole thing that Andrew Moray died like months after the battle was medical care wasn't that good back in those days, guys. That part of the English host that remained on the southern side, when they saw their comrades' defeat, also fled as quickly as fire off flint. They left Stirling Castle and its town and headed for Dunbar. When Wallace's men had ended English hopes, he instructed John Wright to put the hinged boards back in place, then freed the carpenter from his post. They soon followed in pursuit of those who had fled. Earl Malcolm and his men of the Lennox issued forth from the castle to join in the chase. Along that road and in the Torwood, where some had fled, they killed many Englishmen. The Earl of Warren made good his escape, having Corrispatrick for his guide. They secured fresh horses along the way to aid their escape, and arrived at Dunbar with only a small remnant of their great army. By the way, Dunbar is like 70 or 80 miles away from Stirling. The Scots' horses weakened on the long ride, and many could not maintain the chase, unsurprisingly. Wallace and Graham, who were always together, made great slaughter at Haddington when the Englishmen's horses had tired. Haddington, by the way, is just outside of Edinburgh. When Ramsay joined Wallace, the leader was very happy to see him arrive safely, along with his good friends Robert Boyd and Richard Lundy. 3,000 of his army had reached Haddington, and Wallace found that Wallace of Riccarton, that's Adam Wallace, and the Earl Malcolm had also reached that town. The Scots battled with the English soldiers and gained total victory. Warren and Corrispatrick passed through Dunbar in great sorrow over their defeat. Wallace followed until he too had reached Dunbar. 20,000 of the English host were dead, but fortunately for the escapees, Wallace ceased the chase at Belton, commanding his men to stop, and explaining that to follow any more at this point would have been in vain. They lodged in Haddington that night, and in the morning returned to Stirling. This was on the feast of the Assumption of Our Lady. Always loved by Our Lady, by her grace, she was often the protector of Wallace, helping him in many circumstances. Soon after the Battle of Stirling Bridge, Wallace had the barons swear a great oath of allegiance to Scotland's cause. There was many a man of good will who wished to come into his presence at this time, but he sent them a message to remain at their defences. See how clever Wallace is? Don't all gather in one place. The English could come back on us if we're not careful. Sir John Menteith was then the Lord of Arran. He came to Wallace, and before witnesses he bound himself with an oath to stay loyal to Scotland and to Wallace. Sir John Menteith, by the way, was the man who betrayed Wallace. Whoever by his own free will refused to be loyal to Scotland, Wallace had him punished rigorously. Some he imprisoned, others he had executed. His fame spread through both Scotland and England. They soon freed Dundee by a simple treaty of sparing the lives of the English there and allowing them safe passage to return to England by ship. Of course, Dundee's on a river, so it makes sense. It's actually on the coastline. Within 10 days of this event, there were no more English captains left in Scotland except for the mighty castles of Berwick and Roxburgh, but Wallace hoped to soon remedy this. At that time there was a worthy true baron, Crystal of Seaton. He had lived in the Jedburgh forest for safety, living as an outlaw from the English and opposing them always. Edward could not persuade him to break faith with Scotland. One day the English knight Harbottle issued from Jedburgh Castle, setting out on a journey into England. Crystal with 40 men attacked Harbottle, who with his men numbered 80, and won the day. He slew the English captain and many fierce men and gained great riches. He won the castle of Jedburgh and obeyed Wallace's command to leave Ruthven as the captain there. Bold Seaton then moved into Lothian to abide there. You will read more of him in this book, and in the book written of Bruce, should you wish to read that too. By the way, I'm still trying to find that book. He was with Bruce in many fierce adventures. That would be an awesome book to get a hold of if ever it managed to fall into my hands somehow. But there you see the strategy of Wallace, how he's very, very clever, how he organises the battle, orchestrates it very carefully, urges his men not to go too far when they're beginning to tire, recognises when to call it off, when it's not really optimal to continue pursuing the English, basically let them go home and lick their wounds and think about this almighty ass kicking that we've just handed them. I think it's as much to do with, let them go home and spread the news. It reminds me actually of the Battle of the Pelennor Fields of the Lord of the Rings. So I've got in front of me right now the book The Lord of the Rings, and this is the passage from page 830. I think this applies just as much to the Battle of Stirling Bridge as it does to the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. So have a listen to this passage. Hard fighting and long labour they had still, for the Southrons were bold men and grim and fierce in despair, and the Easterlings were strong and war-hardened and asked for no quarter. And so in this place and that, by burned homestead or barn, upon hillock or mound, under wall or on field, still they gathered and rallied and fought until the day wore away. Then the sun went at last behind Mindoluin, and filled all the sky with a great burning, so that the hills and the mountains were dyed as with blood. Fire glowed in the river, and the grass of the Pelennor lay red in the nightfall. And in that hour the great battle on the field of Gondor was over, and not one living foe was left within the circuit of the Ramis. All were slain save those who fled to die, or to drown in the red foam of the river. Few ever came eastward to Morgul or Mordor, and to the land of the Haradrim came only a tale from far off, a rumour of the wrath and terror of Gondor. I like that this is emphasised also, in real life at the Battle of Stirling Bridge, that not all the English just tucked tail and ran away and just gave up, instantly as soon as their captain was slain. Some of them made proud islands of defence, and some of them gave the Scots a hard time, because that's realistic. Sometimes you do have these corps of veterans that form up these islands of defence, that they have to be overcome and, dealt with directly, and they don't all just run away, It's not as simple as that, It was a very, very, very hard fought, gruesome, brutal battle, the Battle of Stirling Bridge, and the English, they did fight hard, they didn't just automatically just run away and flee like the drivel you see in Braveheart, where it's just elementary, basic military 101 tactics that a first year cadet at, military school would learn at West Point or Sandhurst, The real battle was very cleverly orchestrated by Wallace, and his leadership was absolutely impeccable at every step along the way. And this is what really put Wallace on the map as a main threat and as a serious contender, in terms of challenging King Edward's authority in Scotland and being able to, in fact, challenge his armies in the field. Anyway, I hope that you have enjoyed this account, and thank you for listening.